Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC, and this is the fire episode. Like two apocalyptic pyromaniacs, we are going to give you as many ways as we can come up with to start fires and build fires and keep fires going. So this is kind of a super back to basics episode. Like, let's just talk about...
This one's going to be fun.
Yeah, let's talk about fire, man.
I think maybe we should give like a quick disclaimer, because you
That's
are
a good
talking
call.
about things that can ignite and combust, and
Yep.
fire does hurt. So this is all at your own risk, but this should be a fun one because we did a ton of research for this and we've tried most of these out ourselves. So this is really like field tested episode, and we're going to post some videos on our YouTube channel so you can see exactly how to practice some of these, especially the harder or more difficult methods. But that way you have the knowledge when you need it, and not just the knowledge of all of these methods, but also like the wisdom to use the correct method based on your particular situation.
Yeah, that's true. There is a difference between the knowledge and the wisdom. Like, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Is that what you mean?
Not not exactly, but I'm going to give you points for creativity. But like I said earlier, we are going to put some of this up on our YouTube channel. We do have all of our episodes, and we have separate videos on some of the tips, tricks, life hacks, prepping hacks, some of the things that we've gone over that have been more complicated to vocalize. They need a visual element. We do have a YouTube channel, and it's Stakeholder Prepping Podcast on YouTube. Really easy to find, but our entire episode library, plus all of these extra videos, is on there if you want to check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a lot of people that only listen on YouTube, which is crazy. I don't know. I would love for somebody to tell me why you listen to something on YouTube that doesn't have any video. I think, Chris, you had said maybe if somebody listens at work, YouTube is one of those sites that might not be blocked on like company intranet or something. Is that your theory?
I think so. I think that's a big part of it. Is YouTube is allowed for a lot of corporations, and if people are trying to listen while they're working, that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So yeah, it's all awesome intel, and we really do appreciate everybody who's emailed us with comments and episode ideas. You know, we write every one of those people back, and sometimes we even send out some little prize packs and good gear and stuff like that. So, I got another one. Knowledge is memorizing the lyrics to every Taylor Swift song, but wisdom is knowing when to pretend you didn't do that.
Better.
Okay.
Better.
Good.
But rather than T Swift, let's stick to prepping. So let's get started with this one. You just want to go back and forth on this? You want to kind of start off, AC?
Yeah, let's do this. So the first and only correct way to start a fire is a Bic lighter. That's it. End episode. Chris, do the outro thing. You're your own stakeholder, whatever. That was it. Bic lighter. That's it.
Yeah, this is a super short episode then.
But seriously, I don't know if there is a cheaper, easier way to start a fire than a Bic lighter. Like, they're cheap too. They're small, and even the small ones seem to last forever. I don't know if the small or the big ones actually last longer than the small ones. Like, they just seem to last forever. But there are a couple of Bic lighter hacks, and I obviously take one with me whenever I go hiking or backpacking, and I've got a whole fire starting kit I made that fits into like a little Altoid size tin, and there's a Bic lighter in there for I would call it the non-technical fire starts. But one thing I like to do with the Bic lighter is use it to hold cordage or tape. So you can easily get a few feet of duct tape wrapped around the Bic lighter, and then you won't notice it until you need it. Just wrap it around and use it as a tape holder. So I really do like doing that. Now,
We
for more
actually do that every time we travel, just in case you have a wardrobe malfunction. You've got duct tape so you can fix it.
Yeah, perfect example. It's you don't know it's there until you need it. You can wrap cordage, you can wrap dental floss, you can wrap duct tape, electrical tape around a Bic lighter and get a few feet in there, and then you won't notice it. Now, for a more tactical hack, with just a bit of duct tape, you can depress that little button so it's constantly depressed and ignite the lighter, and then you could secure that lighter with just a little bit more duct tape in sort of the upside down configuration. And in 10 to 20 seconds, that lighter will explode. So, disclaimer,
Yeah.
this is dangerous. So proceed at your own risk. But this is a cool James Bond style shit move. If you need to create a distraction or a diversion, this is your cool Bic lighter bomb hack combo.
Yeah, and it is very utilitarian. There are other ways that you can hack Bic lighters. Some of the ones with the adjustable flames, you can take off the little child safety guard and adjust that flame until it'll drain the entire tank in like 6 seconds. And then
Oh
you've got
yeah.
a flamethrower.
Yep.
We all did that when we were back in high school and just dicking around with these things in school. Not the best use of our time, but whatever. Um, Luckily, those Bic lighters, they are cheap. They come like $5 for $1, so you can practice different preps. But yeah, use it at your own risk. We are not telling you to make explosives. We are not trying to get the convoy of black Suburbans to show up on your lawn.
That's right.
Don't do that. That's a bad idea. But I'm gonna start off with a fairly simple one, but this is a throwback to one of my dollar preps from way back on episode 2, the magnifying glass. Now,
Oh,
obviously, this does require direct sunlight, so you're not going to be trying to use this one on overcast days or in the evening or when it's raining out or things like that. But if you have never done this before, if you've never burned ants on the concrete with a magnifying glass, this is kind of how it works. So you find what direction the sun is coming from, and you kind of put your back to it and hold the magnifying glass, or really any magnified glass or crystal. The reading glasses, if you already have a steady hand, you can do this with binoculars, really anything that focuses light, any type of lens or camera optic or anything like that. Not the one on your phone, that's just digital and usually
right.
too small, but you're going to hold the magnifying glass so that the sun goes through it and it makes a small dot of light. And the way that you can find that dot is just by adjusting how far away the magnifying glass is. The more curvature it has, the more it's going to distort that focal point. So if you've got a very, very flat lens, you may have a very distant focal point. So you're actually standing 2 feet away from what you're trying to set on fire. If
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
very round object, like the small little crystal balls that you can find at Hobby Lobby or whatnot, that's going to have a lot closer focal point and it may not work as well. So finding where that point is, if you run it across your hand, it's going to be very, very hot very, very quickly. But usually a foot to 18 inches for most magnifying glasses or lenses. But you want to make that dot the smallest that you possibly can. So finding that angle is sort of hard at first, but once you figure it out, which way you have to tilt it or rotate your wrist to create that correct point of light, it's pretty easy. You want to aim this at very, very dry tinder, like dry leaves or the stakeholder prepping tinder card. Spoiler alert. Now, as soon as it starts to smoke, you're going to want to gently blow on it, give it more oxygen, give those super tiny coals that you're building some more to fuel it. And what you really want to try to do is get it to smoke, get it to catch fire, and then have very dry tinder close to you. So as soon as you get that initial flame, you can start adding to it slowly at first so you don't suffocate it, but you can keep it going. And this goes for all of these. So sometimes you may only get one shot at making a fire, so preparation is key with every one of these. But all fires, they require three things to keep going. They require heat, they require fuel, and they require air or oxygen. So
That's a good point.
once you understand the basics of this, you're going to learn some very, very quick ways to make fire that are effective for you.
Yeah, and that's a great call. Having dry tinder at the ready can really mean the difference between having a nice warm cozy fire and dying. So let's chat about tinder for a minute. One thing I really like to do when I'm hiking is grab natural tinder when I start and just put it in my pocket. Just shove it in your pants pockets, assuming you're not soaking wet, and it will dry out the tinder while you're walking, and then it's just there and dry when you need it. Um, Birch bark is a really good one because birch bark sort of rolls as it dries out, and it contains these flammable resins. So it's a really good one. Just shove it in your pocket, peel it off, shove it in your pocket, and as you're walking, your pants are naturally going to draw that out and draw the water out, and you'll have dry tinder when you need it. Another one that's a bit more prevalent in the forests, any of those fibrous lichens, you'll hear them called like witch's beard or bearded lichen. But you'll recognize it if you saw it. It's basically a very hairy moss, and they're great fire starters. And just peel that off the tree when you see it hanging there, shove it in your pocket, and the body heat and the fibers of your pants will just sort of draw the moisture out, and then you'll have this dry tinder when you need it. Um, Also, if you remember from our second dollar prep episode, I had talked about using the 10-cent pencil sharpener to make cordage or sharpen sticks or make tinder. So if you want to modify one and make cordage, then I recommend getting the double hole pencil sharpener. And then you can use the small side, modified a little bit like I showed you with the Dremel. That's on our YouTube page as well. And you can make cordage out of that side, and then use the large side for making tinder or sharpening sticks. I just saw on Amazon there was a 4-pack of the metal ones for $4. So I would say metal's the way to go. Is like two of the single hole metal ones and two of the double hole metal ones. So obviously metal one going to be a lot more robust, and you could definitely add one of these to your hiking loadout. Like I said, get the double one, notch out the small side to make cordage, and then the bigger side you can use to make tinder. And like Chris said, we have a tinder card now, and we've
This
had
thing is so cool.
It's
This thing
pretty
really
cool.
is so
We
cool.
put a lot into this, a lot of thought, a lot of testing, and a few of you listening have tested these out for us, and we've gotten really good feedback. These cards are about the size of a business card, but they're not made out of your typical like business card material. They're made out of like a bamboo cotton blend, so they burn really clean, like way cleaner than I guess those typical, paper, bleached paper business cards. And then the edges are coated with beeswax from my own personal apiary, actually. And I think we may have talked about this, but beeswax actually has more BTUs than other wax, like paraffin.
Which is really, really wild to me.
It's crazy to think about that, right? Like that nature made a more efficient wax. But yeah, the beeswax is a more efficient and a higher BTU wax. They also have on one side printed, they have a number of different ways to start a fire on them and some kind of different fire styles. And then they have these instruction lines. And I guess, Chris, you're going to have to post a video about how to use them. But basically, you can fold them in such a way that you can either make them as a fire base so they set up, or as more of a vessel holder for like magnesium shavings or for other tinder. So that's really cool. We actually have these up on our eBay store now, so if you want to buy a handful of them, you can. It helps us show a little bit, but trust me, we're not making money on these. I'm literally hand dipping the wax myself, so it's a process, but they're just a cool thing that we came up with, and a lot of you that have seen them already have given us really good feedback.
And yeah, we did put a ton of effort into planning these. So don't forget, we actually strategically placed a couple of magnifying glass targets on the side of these.
Oh, I forgot all about that. The black targets, yeah.
Yeah, we've got black squares right in that wax line. So, AC, you can probably better explain like the thermal advantages of having a black target because black absorbs energy and it's more effective and it catches fire quicker because of that. It retains heat and all of that. But we did actually put a ton of thought into these Tinder cards. So, those black targets, they are different size to show your kindling and tinder recommendations, and then you can use the card and that target to heat up very quickly. And we'll definitely show a video of getting the magnifying glass going on that because it will have some instructional videos, but these are absolutely awesome cards. Another cool one that's along those same lines as the magnifying glass is the water bag. Now, this is possible, even though it sounds kind of counterintuitive. You take a clear, heavy plastic bag, like a Ziploc, a clean Ziploc, and you fill it about halfway with water, and then twist that little sandwich bag of water into as close of a sphere as you can really get it. You know, the tighter you make that plastic without popping it, the better. But this is how you make your magnifying glass like lens. All it is using the water to create a lensatic effect and focus that sunlight the same way that a magnifying glass would. But the reason this works is that transparent sphere that you created, it is going to act like a lens working on both sides of it, on the sunlight side and on the fire side, and it focuses the sunlight through it. The cleaner the water, the better. The cleaner the bag, the better. And those two opposite sides, they combine into this biconvex lens. So you need to find that perfectly round point in your sandwich bag bubble and use that to direct the sunlight down onto the tinder. But give it a little bit of time and keep that point of sunlight kind of perfectly centered on the same spot on your tinder, and it'll heat up. And you should start seeing smoke rise out of it. Double lenses heat things because light slows down when it passes through them, and then it bends with the shape. So bending more in that thinner section and less in thicker areas, it concentrates that sunlight into that single focal point. And all of that is adding heat onto a combustible fuel source. There are only so many ways that fires can start. So electrical, radiothermic, nuclear, friction, and am I missing one?
Maybe chemical?
Chemical. Yep. That's the only 5 that I can think of, really.
Yeah, you're right. But that is amazing. Science is cool, man. Like, go thermodynamics. That's pretty rad. So here's one that you may have heard of, and this is really cool. I've actually done this. All you need is a 9-volt battery, like your standard out of the ceiling bird 9-volt battery, and steel wool. And this is easy. You simply touch the 2 poles of the battery to the thinnest strand of steel wool, and it will ignite. Now, all of the standard batteries, the 9-volt is the one you need. It won't work with AA's. You need higher voltage. But if you had like a car battery or something higher amperage, yeah, you could start all kinds of fires with basically anything. But that probably won't fit in your EDC loadout. So a couple of tips on the 9-volt and steel wool fire starter. You want to use new steel wool because it has some oils in it that come from the manufacturing process, and that will actually aid in combustion. And then you want really thin steel wool. So I think it's like the quadruple aught is the thinnest of the steel wools, and that's going to combust a lot easier. The older and rustier, actually, the less effective it's going to be because that's starting to create iron oxide, which isn't near as flammable. Unless, God, I'm just talking about like making bombs this whole episode. We probably shouldn't air this one. This one should just go in the folder. But unless you have some like aluminum powder, and then you can make thermite. So maybe, we could take this one a little further, a 2-to-1 solution of aluminum powder and iron oxide. But then you would need a way to make powder. But yeah, clean steel wool, if it starts to rust, it's not good for much. It's not going to create a fire. But yeah, you could make thermite with it, and that's actually really cool.
And it's the same thing. As soon as you complete that circuit and touch both the positive and negative terminals to steel wool, or this is how you can make a gum wrapper, that foil
Yep.
wrapper along the
If it's
outside of the gum.
conductive. Yep, that's right.
If it's conductive, it can light on fire. That's the electrical part of starting fire. It's just overheating those molecules until they burn.
That's right. Yep.
And the next one that I want to talk about, you may or may not have heard about this before, but it does definitely work. Again, you do need the sun, so don't try this in the middle of the night. Although it takes some prep, so you might have to, kind of start before the sun comes up. You can actually start a fire with a soda or beer can.
Really?
It's if you can find an aluminum can, and you do need something that's abrasive as a polish. Toothpaste is a good one. I've seen this done with a small amount of chocolate, believe it or
Really?
not. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's weird. You can use steel wool too. You can use just about anything that's abrasive enough. But the goal here is to put a super high polish on the bottom of that beer can or that soda can where it's naturally reflective and shiny. The labeling isn't on there, but that curve acts as a parabolic dish. So if you
Oh.
put a super super high polish on it and get some ultrafine sand or mud or something like that, you can do it. But you polish that bottom of the can to a mirror finish, basically, and it does take about an hour of polishing to get it perfect. It's time consuming, but then you point the bottom of the can at the sun and then hold a piece of tinder away from it, right where that reflection point is, that parabolic antenna, or it's working like a satellite dish. It's just focusing everything into one spot, and you can concentrate all of that sunlight into one spot. And once you see that smallest, most focused beam of light, you just put something in there to ignite. And again, make sure you have your tinder very, very close so you can capture that fledgling coal that you've created. But it does work.
Wow. Yeah, so you're basically focusing the light like a parabolic dish. That's really cool. Yeah, we're gonna have to post some YouTube videos of that. I don't know, Chris, did you ever work with any of like the 12 Bravos or 21 Bravos at all in your unit? The combat engineers?
Yes and no. The stuff that we needed them to do was more on the destruction side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely EOD. We called them out a few different times, but not as much on the building side as much on the demolition
Yeah.
side.
And so along those lines, one thing there's something that they teach all the 12 Bravos called Monroe effect, which is really cool. And what you do is you basically can pack like C4 in the bottom of that shape of a wine bottle. It's like I think it's called a punt is the bottom of that wine bottle, but you make a shape charge with it and you do a standoff, and it's basically that where it creates this reverse parabolic dish, and that shape charge with a little bit of a standoff in that shape of that wine bottle will do exactly that. It'll focus that explosion right down into that one little tiny center point. And so that's like the classic basics shape charge is they call it the Monroe effect is the scientific effect, but it's basically the parabolic dish with explosives. Really kind of cool.
I've studied the Monroe effect for both of my degrees, especially the
Stop.
Homeland Security one.
Really? No kidding.
It's wild what the science behind it will do, and that's unfortunately that is exactly how explosively formed projectiles that are the EFPs, the vehicle killers,
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
that's how
how
it
they operate.
a standoff with that parabolic shape, and it focuses that explosion right into that single point, and that absolutely will ruin your day. So God, we're just talking about bombs. We got to stop this. Okay, so now let's talk about some ways to start a fire without the sun. Obviously, having a ferro rod is a good one, and like I said, man, I always thought that ferro rods and flint were kind of the same thing. I think ferro rods just kind of showed up at some point. When I was a kid, it was always the flint and steel, or like that little magnesium fire starter with the little flint on it. And then all of a sudden there were all these ferro rods everywhere, and it's way cooler. And this is that planning thing Chris and I talked about. If you plan ahead, then you won't be using your Hershey's bar to polish your beer can. So now ferro rods and flint, they're totally different. Flint is it's it's a cold spark is what it is. It's about a 500-degree spark, while a ferro rod is like a 5,000-degree spark. But you're not going to find a ferro rod out in nature. Flint is natural, and depending on your area, this can be pretty prevalent actually, and they're fairly easy to locate. Flint will create a spark when you strike it with steel, and this is a lot easier if you have high carbon steel. So maybe using the back of your knife blade, if you're like using a bushcraft knife. Remember, Joe Flowers taught us, and I think even Eric Orris talked about that the bushcraft knives generally are very
Mhm.
high carbon. So having high carbon steel is a hack for this. But flint is a quartz, and the property that makes it spark is actually the high silica content. So you can start a fire with any of these high silica rocks. It's not just flint, but any of the quartz or agates or chert or jasper, anything with that smooth, glassy appearance is going to be a very good candidate for fire starting because of its high silica content.
I wonder how much of that is the piezoelectric effect, because quartz is actually used to keep time as well in high. Uh,
Oh, that's
yeah, you
right.
put a little bit of pressure on it, and it creates an electrical current, and you can keep time. That's how a lot of watches work.
That's the quartz movement. The quartz movement is exactly that. I would love to have done a little more research before that because I totally want to talk about that someday. Because, yeah, you're right. That quartz movement is a very weird, cool thing that helps keep time.
Yes, and the the ferro rods, like you're talking about, a lot of them are magnesium or magnesium alloys, magnesium aluminum. There are some steel aluminum ones. You talked about thermite a little bit, that when you make those scrapings, it'll actually put a small amount of thermite, and then when you spark it, it creates this small pocket of thermite that's super, super hot and catches everything around it on
Oh,
fire.
yeah.
But you don't find those in nature. What you do find
Right.
is the flint, the jasper, the obsidian. Not great because that's more of a too high of a silica content. There's not enough friction there. It just
Right.
shatters.
Yep.
The thing about flint is, because of the way that those crystals and molecules line up, it does become very, very sharp very quickly. So it's easy to cut your hand on a small piece of flint.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Any of
And
those, any of the quartz for sure.
and then the blood dripping is not going to burn. Your tinder is no longer bone dry, it's blood wet, and now you have other difficulties.
That's right. Yeah. Now you have more problems.
But both of them are kind of old school, more the mechanical side of things.
Yeah.
That's friction and piezoelectricity, I guess, that's creating that spark. But I'm going to go kind of ultimate old school on you here. So you can start a fire with nothing more than two sticks if you rub them together correctly. And I'm sure people know this, or you've seen or heard, this is basically a colloquialism for the hardest way to do something.
Right. It's like rubbing two sticks together, man.
Right. And
Right.
you see it on the old school Looney Tunes cartoons, and every once in a while you'll see somebody on like Naked and Afraid trying to do
Yeah.
this, or
Sure.
there's all kinds of stuff that goes with it. But when you're looking at this, there are three basic tried and true methods that we can use here.
Hmm.
And we happen to have all three of those illustrated on our Tinder card. So if you're trying to, in an emergency, light a fire and you've got that Tinder card, it walks you through it.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
The most efficient is going to be like the bow drill method. And there are better and worse woods to use as a fireboard. And people teach these kind of primitive skills. They say cottonwood is the best or the easiest, but a bow drill set, it includes what's called a hearth board and or a fireboard. It's a relatively flat, sturdy piece of wood. A drill, which is another wooden stick, and then a bow, which is a semi longer bowed stick that has a string on it. And then you also have a bearing block and an ember pan and your tinder. But the bearing block is to protect your hand. The ember pan is once you start to get things hot, you want to collect all of your hot stuff. So it just reinforces and gets hotter
Oh,
and hotter and hotter.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the way this works is the drill gets twisted into that bowstring and then held between the hearth board and the bearing block. So you're just taking a straight stick, wrapping a string around it once, and that string happens to be attached to another stick. That's your handle. And then you push down on it with your other hand because it's going to be rotating. That's where your bearing block comes in. And you're pushing down on it to create more friction. So this whole assembly is kept secure and sturdy by securing the hearthboard to the ground with your foot or holding that bearing block tightly against your skin, against your shin, not your skin, your shin.
Yeah.
The bow is then moved backwards and forwards quickly. So the faster the better because it's going to get that drill to rotate and rub against that hearthboard, and that causes a lot of friction. Think of rug burns on your elbows from when you were a kid playing around on the carpet. Same concept, but now we're applying it to wood, which doesn't scrape off as much, doesn't give you the infected
Oh,
elbows.
yep,
It just creates heat.
yep.
And so you get this notch that gets cut out of the hearthboard where kind of a small pile of black charred dust collects underneath the drill. That dust eventually becomes so hot that it ignites and begins to smolder. And that smoking ember is then added into that tinder, thrown onto the tinder card and gently blown. And eventually it just bursts into flames. Once it gets enough oxygen, it's gone.
Yeah, okay.
And then the second method, it's called the hand drill. Basically, it's the same thing, but without the bow. So hopefully you can find gloves for this one because you're probably going to end up with some blisters if you try it without it. Same setup, but you're twisting that drill piece with your hands super fast back and forth while applying downward pressure. So both of these methods are easier with two people. Having someone apply pressure or something to apply pressure to the top of the stick and stabilize it makes these way easier.
Okay.
The third one, and this is the one that I've actually practiced a few different times. It's called a fire plow. The fire plow works by creating friction between two pieces of wood, same concept, and it produces that hot dust or embers that can be ignited into a flame. But this method involves rubbing the point of a stick, which is called the plow, back and forth within a groove on a larger piece of wood, which is called the trough. And you just start pushing really hard, really fast, back and forth in this channel, and you create enough friction that you get the same thing. Friction generates heat, the resulting dust gets collected up and bursts into flames. And again, all of these three are briefly illustrated on the stakeholder prepping Tinder card, but they do take practice. This is not something that you're going to get right the first time you try it.
God, I hope I never have to do any of those. Just pack your Bic lighter and then you never have to do this. But or the Oopie lighter that I talked about. That was in the $10 preps episode. That thing is so tiny. It's just part of my EDC loadout and I never even know it's there. It's secured to my little Gerber dime with my little tactical hair tie there. And that's just always in my pocket. I never noticed that I have it. And they advertise that as the world's smallest kerosene lighter, but it doesn't have like the downfalls of the Zippo. Like the kerosene doesn't evaporate because it's got a screw on top with like little gasket. So the kerosene doesn't evaporate like it does in a Zippo. So I love that thing. Like every time I pulled it out, it lights. It's just not like a Zippo, and it's super tiny. Now it definitely doesn't last as long as the Bic, because I think those are like they last forever. Um, but it's so tiny. Yeah, I just
Eventually, it's
never
going to have
noticed.
to be refilled, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
and
Yeah.
I usually like before I, say go on the road where I'm not going to have a little can of kerosene with me or whatever, I'll always just top it off. But it's since I don't use it, it's always pretty much topped off. Now,
And did you know that the lighter was actually invented before Strike Anywhere matches?
no, really?
Yeah. So the lighter, the cigarette lighter, was invented about 20 years before Strike Anywhere matches, because the compound for those match heads, it took a lot more science to get that right than just the traditional flint and steel approach to miniaturizing it and putting it in a lighter.
That's crazy. I would have never thought that. That's crazy.
It's
So
really cool.
now once you start the fire, there are a few different methods to actually like building a fire base. And I think there's 7 of those printed on the Tinder card for reference, like just different ways to build a fire. And there are different ways to build a very simple primitive fire that have vastly different uses. The basics are, and you've probably all seen this, like the teepee fire or the log cabin fire. These are best used for like a situation where you require quick heat. Like if you're trying to warm up after being cold, or you just need to boil water really quickly. It's also a good choice for the social fire, right? This is the social fire. We want to sit around and have the fire chat. These are the 2 ways to do it, where the upward heat direction is kind of desired. You just want the heat to go straight up, and we're going to make a really hot fire. We can all sit around it. That's a really good one. Um, then you've got fires like the tea fire or the keyhole fire, which are really good cooking fires because you basically start a fire on one side of the dugout. Like you could start it with a keyhole or sorry, start it with a teepee or another fire method, but then you can rake coals over to the key or tea area for cooking. So you've got hot coals to cook over. And that's the point of having that odd shaped dugout there, is so you can drag coals over. But
Those are
again,
also really great if you're going to build a temporary smokehouse and smoke something over it, because you don't
100%.
have the
Yep.
direct fire heat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've just got the hot coals. So it's a way to start a fire on one end of this little keyhole or T. And then once you get those hot coals going, you can drag those over. And then that's kind of your working area for the fire. But yeah, these aren't like a great social fire. So those are kind of like the big 4 on the card, probably.
And there is one on there. We always want to bring some sort of tactical ideas to this, and this wouldn't have any tactical aspects to this episode if I didn't reference the U.S. Army Field Manual on this one. Good old FM 3 Tech 05.70. One of the most tactical fires you can build, and we do have this on the Tinder card. It's called a Dakota fire hole, or a Dakota fire pit. It goes by both names. This is a type of fire pit. It's designed for efficiency and really stealth as well. Often used for cooking and heating in outdoor settings because it is very, very wind resistant to keeping your fire going. What it involves is digging 2 connected holes. One is for the fire and the other is for air intake. So just like when you were a kid, digging holes on the beach and you build those little tunnels, think about that, but you're building a fire in one of those holes. So the air gets pushed in from the wind side, and it allows for this strong smoke reducing burn. It burns hot, it burns fast, so you do need quite a bit of fuel on hand, but it's a great fire for expedient or discreet cooking. It doesn't produce a whole lot of smoke. It is the exact opposite of a social or warming fire, though, because you're not going to get a lot of heat unless you're standing right over the top of it. And there are some other really good ideas in the field manual if you are looking into more. We're not going to read it here, but we will post a link. There's some great info on making wind blocks, different fire techniques, things like that to keep you safe, warm, alive. Some of them are kind of brutal, but just remember there's three things that keep a fire together, and that's air, heat, and fuel. You can keep a fire going indefinitely once you understand that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there is some good stuff in the field manual, and that Dakota Hole fire, that's a very cool, very technical fire, but yeah, not really good for heat because all the heat is just getting sucked out into the ground, right? So you're not going to sit around that one and get warm, but as an expedient cooking fire with no smoke signature, or very little smoke signature if you do it right, then yeah, that's a very good kind of tactical fire. If you have the ability to dig a hole, that's yeah, that's exactly right. So, um we've got a little time left, Chris. I was going to talk about some of the other just sort of fire gear if you want.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
one that I like that I carry with me is the bellows, like a little pocket bellows, and you can find these on Amazon. It's basically like an expandable metal straw, and it's a really good piece of gear to have in your loadout for firecraft because then you're not putting your face in that fire to get it going. And especially all the ones you were talking about, like the bow drill and fire plow and all that kind of stuff. You have to get your face very, very close to that little tiny coal to make anything happen. So having a bellows is really cool. And in sometimes this can do double duty because you could have a metal straw. Straws are good to have too, just as like a drinking tube. Straws are a good thing to have. And if it's a metal one, then it's not going to melt when you get close to the fire. And that can kind of do double duty. So again, that's a very inexpensive Amazon item. And that's a really good thing to have in not necessarily like your EDC loadout, but in your camping or hiking or backpacking gear, just a little expandable metal straw. You can use that for so many things, not just the fire bellows, but yeah, even like the drinking tube. I remember seeing I think it was a Survivor Man episode where I think he used like an old car antenna he had found because that FM antenna was a rigid piece of metal that was hollow in the middle because they're expanding, right? They're telescoping.
Okay.
And so he had broken that off, and then he could dig like a little water purification pit. So he had still water, and then he dug a hole next to it, and it forced the water to filter itself naturally, be like between the sand and the rocks, and I think he had some charcoal in there, and then he kind of created his own little clean water side. And then rather than just sticking your face in a hole in the ground to drink water, then you could use this little like drinking tube is what he called it. But yeah, that's another use for the metal fire bellows. So that's a really cool piece of gear just to have in your loadout.
Oh, absolutely. And it also prevents, that awkward look when you turn around to your camping buddy and you don't have eyebrows anymore
Right.
and they don't tell you, they just laugh at you. Yeah, it
Because
prevents
everything
that.
smells like burnt hair.
um, Another one that I really like, and this does take some forethought and some pre-preparation, but uh, having things like cotton balls in Vaseline or
Oh,
wood
that's
shavings in paraffin. Um, you can take a dried out tuna can and your pencil sharpener and just scrape off a ton of brand new kindling and then melt paraffin wax or Vaseline or anything like that over the top of it. And you get like a fire paste.
yeah,
And
and you can have like literally a fire pit in your pocket.
yeah, and I've seen a couple of people do this where they'll take wood shavings and paraffin wax, or in this case, Vaseline. They'll kind of heat the Vaseline up so it's a liquid, and then pour it over the paraffin wax. Let it cool, and then they scrape it out and put it into a cleaned out, cut open toothpaste container. The toothpaste tube. They'll just slice the end off of that, refill it with this fire paste, and then use a curling iron or a straightening iron, like a hair straightening iron, to reseal that tube back.
Oh,
And they've got it's it's the size of a toothpaste tube, but it's all fire paste in there, and it works brilliantly.
yeah, like your make your own fire paste. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, I actually bought This was like an off the shelf product I'd purchased that's like a little, it basically is like a tuna can. It's a fire pit on the go. It's just a little mini fire pit. So you can like make s'mores basically anywhere is what it was for. Like if you're camping, you can just set it up on the picnic table. But I actually have one of those like in my get home bag because if you ever just need to sit around and warm up around a fire, yeah, it's like a little expedient little fire pit, which is kind of cool.
Have you ever looked at um, or have you ever collected your dryer lint as
Oh yeah,
kindling?
that's explosive. Absolutely. Dryerlint's a great one.
There's a reason that a major source of house fires every year from an insurance perspective is the dryer catching fire because it's not
Right.
cleaned out.
Yep.
Eh, Dryer lint is, like you said, explosive, and it's one of those things. Every time that my wife or I are doing the laundry, once it's done, we scrape out that lint trap and just dump it into a plastic bag, and we keep it for fire starting. So we've got just gallon plastic bags that are all squished down and super compressed dryer lint, but we've got probably 1,000 fires worth of kindling that we can just pull out one of those bags, tear a little bit off, light it on fire, and it's gone.
Yeah, you're right. That is a huge uh cause of so many house fires because that ultra dry dryer lint is just so incredibly flammable. And as it gets into that dryer tube and there's less air pressure behind it, then yeah, it just builds up in there. And that's why they say you always need to clean out your dryer vents because that's what happens is that lint is just building up around the walls and it is ultra flammable. So yeah, you can reuse that for, like you said, simple, easy fire tinder. A piece of gear I like, and this is pretty Gucci, man, but if check out I think it's Exotac is the brand. I have one and it's a ferro rod and it's their big one. It's like their XL ferro rod. It's so much ferro on there that I'll never make it through that for the rest of my life. But it's this big ferro rod, and then the handle end of it has duct tape wrapped around it, and then the end screws off and you can put fire tinder in there. I think it comes with like some little cotton balls or something, but you could put like your Vaseline soaked cotton balls in the end of that. But that's just a really cool piece of gear. It's pretty big because I forget they say how many fires you can start with that, but you can start like 100,000 fires. It's just this giant ferro rod with a really cool handle that's wrapped in duct tape, and then the end of that handle is hollow, so you can put your own fire starters, whatever you want to have for your kindling in there. And I think that's a really cool piece of gear. But again, it's expensive. They're maybe 50 or $60, but it's a very cool fire starter. They've got a good look to them.
And there's another one along those lines. I think it's called Blackbeard, but it's
Oh,
fire cord.
yeah, fire cord. I've never bought those or played with them. I've seen them all over the interwebs. Have you actually played with that stuff?
They're pretty cool, and you don't. It's almost like a foot long piece of inch thick rope or inch and a half thick rope, but
Okay.
it's all just embedded fibers full of fire starting stuff. It is waterproof, which is really cool. Um, and you don't need a lot of it. You cut off half an inch, and you've got enough tinder to start a fire. You just have to add to it. You've got to give it a little bit of a spark, and it'll take off. But then you just wrap up the rest of it, shove it back in the package, and drop it into your pocket, and it's good to go. And those ropes, they are a little bit more on the pricey side, but I think if you cut it right, I think you can get like 150 fires out of one single piece. Like
So
they're
I've
definitely
seen
worth it.
that. You've seen it in those little black deals, but I didn't actually know it was in there. I'd never opened one up. So it's like coated rope. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's very similar to old school shipping rope. Um, but it's kind of black with red highlights in it because of all of the material that they've basically saturated these rope fibers with. So any single one of those fibers will catch fire very quickly.
Interesting. Another one, I mean, magnesium shavings, right? You can either get like the magnesium block and shave that off with like the back, like the square edge, the back of your bushcraft knife is a good way to create those shavings. Or, I bought this on eBay. Just a guy was selling. It's like a peanut butter jar, empty, just full of magnesium shavings, and magnesium is awesome. It's a little voluminous, but it is very, very light in its shaving form. So in my little fire kit I made, I've just got like a little plastic baggie full of some magnesium shavings. Dude, magnesium, when you get that going just with a simple spark, it burns at like, I don't know, it's like 3,000 degrees Celsius. So that's, I don't know, in freedom fractions, it's some nonsensical amount. It's like 5,610 degrees, I think. But anyway, it burns really hot, like the surface temperature of the sun hot. Like it's
It's
very, very hot.
it's a very, very good way to burn your fingers. That's what sparklers are made out of. When you go
Right?
out
They're,
on 4th of
yeah.
July, it's magnesium oxide powder that's been compressed around this. And all I can think of is that meme of the two kids playing with sparklers, and the little girl is dancing around and just having a great old time. And then the little kid runs through, sparkler waving above his head. Somebody gave me fire.
I knew you were going to talk about that, and you have to. If no one knows what we're talking about, you have to look it up. I think it was originally a TikTok video, and now it is like a video meme. But it is just so funny because it's like it's this little girl, and she's just looking at the little sparkler, and then this kid runs by, and he's like feral, and he's like, "Somebody gave me fire," and he's got this hot magnesium sparkler running behind him. I think that's just awesome.
Yep. And yeah, let's give 5-year-olds 4,000 degrees in their palm just because.
Just
Nothing
because it's
bad could possibly happen from this.
because freedom in America is why. Um, so we can't end this episode without giving our friends at Grimm a plug. You know, Grimm has some very cool tools for Firecraft. Lots of cool little cards that tell you how to do all the things we just talked about. But the Grimm Fire card, that was my Kickstarter in the Kickstarter episode. That was the one thing I've
Yep.
ever purchased on Kickstarter. I love it. It's awesome. It is the size of a credit card, obviously a little thicker, but you know, it's the size of a credit card and a couple mils thick. And it's got a decent little knife that pulls off of there, and then it has both like a ferro rod and a magnesium rod in this little fire card. And I want to say those are maybe it's like 29 bucks, but it's a very sturdy piece of gear. And that's one of those things that would go in your wallet and you would never know it's there till you need it. Obviously, that's one that's not going to make it through TSA. So be careful where you take your wallet if you've got that in there. But I really like the Grim Fire card. And then they have like their mini fire card, which is all their mini tools fit in like a dog tag silencer. You can stack them up in there. And their mini fire card is just a little hard, rigid card to scrape off the ferro rod and a little mini ferro rod in the middle that pulls out. But Grimm has some awesome tools, and I really like their fire card is probably my favorite tool they make. It is very well built. It's got a bunch of cool tools, and it has a bunch of different means to start fires, and then a pretty decent little knife in there. And so, yeah, if you check Grim Workshop out, what's our
And we
code
do
for them?
have
Is it
our discount code for
Yeah.
Grim Workshop as well. So I believe you save 10%.
Yep. Is it just
And
prepping?
I believe it's just prepping, but we'll
Yeah.
double check that and make sure that the code hasn't changed. We'll have a
Yep.
link to it on stakeholderprepping.com for sure.
100%.
And it describes everything on there. You know, the codes that we have for different companies. Some of them are stakeholder, some of them are prepping, some of them are stakeholder 10, or uh, we don't necessarily assign those codes or have any say in it. It's what fits into their discount program.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think Grim is prepping though, but yeah, go check Grim out for sure. They have all kinds of cool stuff for all the EDC-ness and Firecraft and Toolcraft and all that stuff. But that Grim Fire card is probably one of my favorite tools I've purchased from them. I really like that one. And yeah, you get 10% off if you use our code. And along those lines, absolutely have your own little Firecraft kit that you know how to use. Chris always talks about this, is falling back into your training. Buy the things you know how to use. For example, Chris is like, yeah, the Blackbeard Firestarter. I've never seen those, so I'm not just going to buy it and then put it in my Firestarter kit and then never use it till I need it, because I just won't know how to use it. So I have my own little personal Firecraft kit that fits in something about the size of an Altoid tin, and it's got everything in there that I know how to use, and including the Grim fire card, that those fit perfectly inside the little Altoid tins. But yeah, making your own fire kit and then knowing how to use it, train with it. That's just the biggest thing. Having all your gear and knowing how to use it. I can't stress that enough.
I mean, we did an entire episode on practicing your preps, and this is one of those things you can actually practice at home. When I was growing up in Scouts, we used to have competitions between troops of who could start the fire the fastest. And the way we would
Oh,
do it is we would take a string and pull it semi-taut over a small fire pit with nothing going on in it, just 12 inches above where the fire was. And then they would say, go, and have a stopwatch. And they would stop the stopwatch when the string burned through. So if you want to practice your preps, just get a piece of cotton string or a piece of yarn or something like that, put it a foot above the ground, and try to build a fire and get it to under a minute. Because I think the fastest we ever got it done was 12 seconds.
the practicing is huge, like the bow drill thing. I've never personally tried that. I guarantee you, if I tried to start a fire right now with a bow drill, I would die of blister way before I ever started a fire.
It will tear your hands up the first time you try it. So if you're not already prepared for that, you might want to look into a contingency medical kit. Just
Good call.
you don't really know what's on all of that wood.
Right.
Where did you pick it up from? So
have your first aid kit, have your trauma kit that Charlie kitted out for us. But yeah, you're exactly right. If I tried to do that today without practicing, there's no way I'd start a fire. I would just die of blistered hands. Cold. I'd die cold of blistered hands, 100%.
Blistered hands, smoke inhalation, and freezing to death.
Sounds terrible.
That's a great way to go. Way to wrap this one up.
Way to wrap it up.
Speaking of, do you have any other Firecraft knowledge or wisdom to pass along, or should we wrap this one up?
Okay, I've got one more. Knowledge is knowing that the capital of North Dakota is Bismarck, but wisdom is knowing not to bring it up at a party in South Dakota.
I'll give it to you.
That is a very regionally specific joke, but I guarantee you that our listeners in North and South Dakota are laughing right now.
Yes, they definitely are. So
Okay, wrap it up. Don't let
I
me
think
talk
that
anymore.
one about wraps this up before we get canceled for the lamest jokes.
And bomb making. You forget the bomb making. I don't think it's the lame jokes that gets canceled.
All of this is for entertainment purposes only. Please don't take anything seriously. Don't
Thank
try
you.
to get the ATF or Homeland Security pulling up in the black Suburbans. That's a bad idea. But definitely join us next week. We are going to take a completely different direction with our adventure together. Until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder, and we will see you then.